A steel mill in Northern Ontario issued layoff notices to 1,000 workers today. Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie says unprecedented tariffs imposed by the U.S. are to blame. The news comes just a few months after the federal government and the government of Ontario pledged $500 million in loans to support the steelmaker.
The Prime Minister looked them in the eye and promised he would protect their jobs, that he would negotiate a win, and I quote, have a deal by July 21st, but it was a bait and switch that is costing people their livelihoods.
We absolutely have every confidence in the Algoma workers as they're going through this hardship, and we will make sure that we support them as they're developing new products and also accessing new markets. We'll fight for these jobs.
Sault Ste. Marie Mayor Matthew Shoemaker joins me now. Hi there, Mayor. Thank you for making time on a difficult day. 1,000 workers who have gotten these layoff notices. The notice is coming just before the holidays, although the layoffs don't take effect until later. What are you saying to people who are directly affected by this?
It's a tough day, obviously, in Sault Ste. Marie, and I've been trying to convey to the community that these are our family members that need our support, and we're going to be there to support them through this challenging time. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to try and reduce the impact or mitigate the impact that these job losses are going to have on each family and on the community as a whole.
I saw a quote from one of the local union representatives who was saying that they still have questions about how permanent these layoffs are. Is that a question in your mind, or are these jobs clearly lost for at least a great length of time?
We believe that the indefiniteness of the layoffs is a sign that these jobs are likely not to come back.
Okay. And when it comes to the cause, we've mentioned Algoma has pointed to the U.S. tariffs. To your mind, is this entirely at the feet of Donald Trump?
Well, the transition to electric arc steelmaking was going to reduce the workforce eventually. I think the original timeline was end of 26, mid 2027. But I think that the reality is much of that may have been able to have been done by retirements, by adding new capacity, which would have otherwise kept the need for employees higher. But the tariffs has really wiped all of that off the map of possibilities, and we are left facing a company that doesn't have a market for 60% of its product, which is what they used to ship down to the U.S., and that we desperately need a tariff deal negotiated and resolved in order to get that market back.
Obviously, I want to talk more about that, but just to make sure the audience is following along with us, and I will not purport to be an expert on the steelmaking process, but this electric arc furnace is moving up the installation of it is the reason that so many of these jobs are being lost. Is there some sense short-term pain, long-term gain? I don't mean to be glib about people's jobs, but in terms of the bigger picture.
Well, I think there is definitely the intention of moving to electric arc furnace steel production is to make the steel plant sustainable for a much longer period of time, so that you can scale up and scale down the amount of steel that's going in, and so that your inputs go up and down as the outputs do, which has not always been the case with coke and iron that go into steelmaking currently. So there is, I think, from a business standpoint, the steel plant made the decision they were going to move to electric arc furnace for those reasons. But it is not going to be seen as a success if the second step of that process ignores the reality of what's happening to workers on the ground. And so that is why we've called on the provincial and federal government from the municipal level to make sure that the impacts are minimized by taking steps to save or support these workers. So that it's not, no one wants to sacrifice jobs in the name of sustainability. You want to be able to be sustainable and have those jobs for the long term.
I do want to talk in a moment about what happens, what kinds of supports the workers could be offered, but help us understand. I mentioned earlier, $500 million loan to Algoma in September. How can that kind of money be laid out by governments and thus taxpayers, and we see these really significant job losses so soon after?
I think that's a legitimate question, one that should be asked of the provincial and federal governments. I do suspect that without that funding, the job losses might be even more significant. So I think that any support the federal and provincial government can give to the steel plant is important to make it sustainable for our community. And so that's why at the time, I celebrated that news as welcome news. Without it, I fear that the job losses would have been greater.
Do you think in this current trade environment, it is conceivable to have government say to big steel producers like Algoma, if we're going to give you these big loans, you can't make significant layoffs?
I think it's conceivable if the loans are of such a nature or in such a quantum that they would, sustain the operations the way they were pre-tariff. That's what I don't think the loans did in September. And so I think that's a legitimate question for the federal and provincial governments and for the company.
And so in terms of helping these people who are now facing the possibility of losing their jobs, I know I saw quotes, federal minister, provincial minister sort of talking about wanting to do what they can to help support these folks. What specifically do you want to see or hope to see?
So 3 things, one from each of the federal and provincial government, and then one from both of them together. So from the federal side, they've been talking about defense procurement for so long that they need to actually turn those plans into action. I want to, see Canadian steel procured in order to have orders on the book for places like Algoma to put into Canadian defense procurement.
And so I'm just going to interject. Would that save these jobs or just hopefully stave off? Because if they're making a technological change, is it just keeping other jobs that might still be at risk?
It's ultimately supporting the quantity of steel that can go out of Algoma Steel. And that's, I think, that transition to electric arc furnace that's being sped up as a result of this announcement recognizes or reflects the current market. So increasing the market, I think, is important to sustaining the current jobs and potentially growing other jobs.
Okay.
Second, from the provincial standpoint, I think that there is a real opportunity here to consolidate Ontario lottery and gaming operations into Sault Ste. Marie. We have half of the office here in the Sault, the other half down in Toronto. I think that there's an ability to ease the economic anxiety in town by consolidating that office here in Sault Ste. Marie, where the jobs are desperately needed. And then finally, we are working on a port project that would see a public port developed here in the Sault. That is going to require both federal and provincial dollars, and that's what we're pushing the feds and the province to accelerate the time frame on, so that we, from a municipal standpoint, from a private sector standpoint, with the partnerships we've got, can try and mitigate some of those losses by offering other employment opportunities in both the construction and operation of the port.
Mayor, I'm sure you know the Prime Minister is headed down to Washington on Friday for this. It's not a trade event. It is a FIFA World Cup soccer draw, but it's expected that he might get a little bit of FaceTime with Donald Trump. If there's one thing you could sort of whisper into the Prime Minister's ear, or I suppose in this case, into the television set so that he gets the message, what is the one thing you would want him to walk into that moment with in terms of what people in your community need?
The trade negotiations right now are not working. And so whether that is a change in tactic of doing something differently to get a trade deal done, or to hit them with counter tariffs more aggressively, I think whatever the current system is needs to be adjusted either more aggressively in a response, or to get a trade deal over the finish line, because the status quo threatens the viability of the steel plant entirely.
Listen, Mayor, it is a difficult day for your community, I know, and for a lot of individuals and families. Thank you for taking the time on this tough day, and all our best to everybody in your community.
Thank you very much.